I never imagined that the words I overheard that night, hidden behind a partially open door, would hurt me more than any tool that had ever injured my calloused hands in 4 decades of working in my shop. "The old man should have died years ago. He's just getting in the way," said my only son while toasting with champagne at the wedding I had paid for with the sweat of my brow. There I was, Charles Miller, with my speech trembling in my wrinkled hands, listening to my own flesh and blood planning my death as casually as planning a vacation. The side room of the most expensive venue in Charleston had Italian marble walls that I had paid for to impress the guests, but at that moment it felt like a cold chamber where my heart was slowly being frozen. Gregory, for whom I had sacrificed nights of sleep, weekends and holidays for 35 years, laughed loudly as he told his bride how he would force me into retirement as soon as he took over Horizon Auto Parts, the empire I had built screw by screw since 1982. "My name is Charles Miller. I'm 68 years old and I'm the owner, or rather, I was the owner until a few weeks ago, of the largest auto parts distribution company in South Carolina, with branches in North Carolina and Georgia. I was born in a small town called Ridgeville, the son of small farmers who could barely sign their names, but taught me that honesty and hard work are worth more than any diploma hanging on a wall. I came to Charleston at 18 with just a cardboard suitcase and dreams of making something of myself. I started as a janitor in a small repair shop, and thanks to my curiosity about parts and engines, I soon became a mechanic's apprentice. Life never handed me anything on a silver platter. Every penny I earned came from sweat dripping down my forehead as I bent over dirty engines or negotiated with tough suppliers from Detroit. When my beloved Mary died of cancer 23 years ago, I was left alone to raise our Gregory, who was only 12 years old. I worked 7 days a week, often sleeping in the shop to save money and give him the education I never had. While other fathers took their sons fishing on Sundays, I was inventorying parts or making emergency deliveries. My dream was simple, that my son wouldn't need to have rough hands and an aching back like mine, that he could sit in air-conditioned offices and wear nice suits instead of grease-stained overalls. Before continuing this story, I'd like to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for letting me share my journey. This is the first time I've opened up like this, you know, and I ask you who are watching to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes we think we're alone with our pain, but when we share, we discover that many people have gone through something similar. Every day there's a new story here on Grandpa's Voice, stories of people like you and me who have lived, suffered, but also found their way. But back to what I was telling you, that wedding night changed everything. While I smiled for photographs and toasted to the family's future, inside I already knew what I needed to do, and believe me, my friend watching me now, the revenge of a patient old man can be sweeter than honey from a beehive. I was born in 1957 in a simple dirt floor house on the outskirts of Ridgeville, South Carolina. We were 6 siblings, and I was the middle child. Dad, Mr. Anthony, worked from sunup to sundown on the farm, growing a little bit of everything. Beans, corn, potatoes, and mainly tobacco, which brought in some money back then. Mom, Mrs. Grace, took care of the house, the chickens, the garden, and still sewed for others when she had time. I studied until 4th grade in the rural community school. It was just one room, with Miss Martha teaching students of all ages. I remember her encouraging me to continue my studies. She said I had a good head for numbers, but in those days a small farmer's son had to help with the work from an early age. By 10, I already knew how to plant, harvest, milk cows, and even negotiate at the town market. What fascinated me most were engines. When the neighbor's tractor broke down, I would watch the mechanics work, memorizing every movement, every part. At 18, after a hard frost destroyed almost our entire crop, I decided to try my luck in the big city. My mother cried for a week, but my father understood. On the morning of my departure, he gave me a pocket knife that had belonged to my grandfather and said, "Son, be as honest as this steel is sharp and as hard-working as the sun that rises every day." I carried those words with me more than any diploma. In Charleston, I started from absolute zero. I slept in a small room at the back of Mr. Gerald's shop, where I worked cleaning the floor and washing parts. but I observed everything. Each mechanic had his way, his tricks with the tools. At night, after everyone left, I would take the old manuals and study until my eyes burned. In 6 months, I was already helping with simple maintenance. In a year, Mr. Gerald promoted me to official apprentice. It was at the shop that I met my Mary. She worked at the bakery on the corner and passed by the shop every day with that elegant walk and the smile that lit up the entire street. It took me 3 months to work up the courage to talk to her. When I finally invited her to a movie, I was so nervous that I dropped a wrench on my own foot. She laughed, but accepted. 2 years later, we were married, living in a small rented apartment near downtown. For 10 years, I worked as a mechanic in different shops, always learning, saving every penny. Mary was an elementary school teacher and also saved part of her salary. Our dream was to open our own shop. In 1982, with our savings and a small bank loan, we bought a modest warehouse in the north side of the city. That's when Horizon Auto Shop was born. The name was her idea because she said our dreams had no limits, just like the horizon. In the beginning, it was just me and one helper. Mary handled the accounts and customer service in her spare time. We worked 7 days a week, from 7 in the morning until 9 at night. I remember falling into bed so tired I didn't even dream, but each satisfied customer brought 2 more. Our reputation grew because we were honest and meticulous. A good mechanic has to be like a doctor, diagnose correctly and treat well. In 1987, Gregory was born, bringing a joy that can't be put into words. He was a smart boy with his mother's bright eyes, and what people said was his father's stubbornness. With his birth, I decided to expand the business. We were no longer just a repair shop, but were starting to sell parts too. Customers always asked where we bought our parts because they were good quality and fairly priced. That's when I had the idea, why not import directly and sell to other shops too? I traveled to Detroit for the first time in 1990 for an auto parts trade show. I came back with 2 supply contracts and a clear vision of what I wanted, to transform Horizon Auto Shop into the largest auto parts distributor in the South. Over the next 5 years, I invested every profit in expansion. We rented a larger warehouse, hired more employees, bought our first delivery truck. Our catalog already had more than 1,000 different items. Mary was my rock, my advisor. She taught me how to organize finances properly, to treat employees with respect, to think long-term. Charles, she would say, a business is like a tree. It needs strong roots before it bears fruit. And so together, we built a solid business with principles. When Gregory was 9, we began to notice that Mary was always tired, losing weight. The doctors took a while to diagnose it. It was advanced pancreatic cancer. We fought against that cursed disease for 3 years. I sold whatever was necessary. I sought treatments in Colombia and even in Atlanta. But in 2000, my Mary passed away, leaving an emptiness the size of the Grand Canyon in my chest. Suddenly, I found myself alone with a 12-year-old boy to raise and a company to manage. Many thought I would crumble, that I would sell everything and give in to sadness. But love for my son gave me strength I didn't know I had. I reorganized my schedule to be home when he returned from school. I hired a lady, Mrs. Judith, to take care of the house and make a decent lunch. At parent-teacher meetings, I was always the only man among the mothers, but I never missed one. At the same time, I worked like a condemned man to expand the company. I wanted to ensure that Gregory had all the opportunities that Mary and I had dreamed of for him. I paid for the best schools, English courses, computer classes, things that were luxuries at that time. On weekends, even exhausted, I tried to make up for my absence during the week. I took him fishing on the Cooper River to the Charleston Battery Games and taught him what I knew about engines and business. In 2005, we took the big leap. We officially transformed Horizon Auto Shop into Horizon Auto Parts, LLC. We bought land on I-26 and built a modern 50,000 square foot warehouse. We imported directly from China and the United States. We had contracts with the largest car manufacturers in the country. Our fleet already had 12 trucks that supplied shops and stores throughout South Carolina and were beginning to enter North Carolina. So that Gregory could have the best possible future, I saved to send him to study business administration at the College of Charleston. It was quite a sacrifice. During those years, I cut all small luxuries. While my friends were buying new cars or going fishing in Florida, I drove a well-maintained 1994 Ford Taurus and reinvested every penny in the business and my son's education. I remember one particularly harsh winter when I postponed buying a new coat to be able to pay the rent for the apartment that Gregory shared with classmates. When he graduated in 2010, I organized a party for 100 people at the Charleston Country Club. I was so proud that my chest felt like it would explode. My son, the son of a farmer who could barely read properly, was now a bachelor in business administration. That day I announced that he would be the financial director of Horizon Auto Parts, which was already making $15 million a year and had 87 employees. The following years were ones of constant growth. We opened branches in Charlotte and Atlanta. Our catalog exceeded 15,000 items. In 2018, we were recognized as the largest auto parts distributor in the Southeast by the National Association of Auto Parts Manufacturers. Everything I built thinking about Gregory's future. The company would be his one day. It was the legacy I would leave. It was around this time that he met Amanda, a young woman from Atlanta, daughter of a renowned doctor, beautiful, educated, with a marketing degree. At first, I was charmed by her. She seemed like the perfect match for my son. She soon moved to Charleston and began working in the company's marketing department. They had modern ideas, talked about digital presence, e-commerce, things I tried to understand with my old mechanic's mind. I noticed subtle changes in Gregory's behavior after Amanda entered his life. He began to question my decisions in the company, sometimes in front of employees. He said I was too conservative, that we needed to innovate or die. He stopped showing up for Sunday lunches at my sister Teresa's house, always saying he had more important commitments. When I turned 65, instead of the party we always had, I received only a quick phone call. They were on a trip to Boston. I overlooked everything. After all, young people are like that, as my sister Teresa would say, trying to console me. But deep down, I felt that something was changing, that my son was moving away not only from me but from the values I had tried to teach him his whole life. Still, when he announced his engagement to Amanda, I spared no expense. I wanted to give him the wedding that his mother would have loved to organize, and that's how we arrived at that night, the wedding night, where I heard the words that changed everything. Well, as I was saying, that wedding night was like lightning striking on a clear day. Nothing prepares you to hear your own son, your flesh and blood, talking about you as if you were a burden, an obstacle to be removed. But to better understand how we got there, I need to go back a bit in time. The first signs that something wasn't right began about 2 years before the wedding. Gregory had returned from a business fair in New York, all excited about new ideas. "Dad, we need to digitize the company. The future is e-commerce." He talked about it as if it were the discovery of the wheel. I, with my old mechanic's mind, tried to keep up. I bought new computers, hired a software company, even took a basic computer course at the Chamber of Commerce. Imagine me, over 60, sitting among young people, learning to use those complicated programs. But it never seemed to be enough. Gregory began to hold meetings without calling me. He changed suppliers I had worked with for decades, saying he had found better prices. He hired consultants who arrived in ties and left with fat checks signed by me. "It's an investment, Dad," he would say, when I questioned the expenses. "We need to modernize." When Amanda entered the scene, the situation worsened. The two formed a pair that was always whispering in the corners of the office. They began to travel a lot on business, Atlanta, New York, even abroad. Each trip was a blow to the company's finances, but they came back talking about important contacts and strategic partnerships that never materialized into actual sales. One day I accidentally found a bill from a restaurant in Savannah, $7,000 in a single night. When I questioned it, Gregory said it was a dinner with potential investors, but I later discovered through the accountant that it was just a celebration of their dating anniversary. It was the first time I raised my voice to my son since he was a teenager. "By what right do you use company money for personal luxuries?" "Dad, you don't understand how modern business works. Sometimes we need to impress to win. And besides, I work just as hard as you for this company." That hurt deeply. Just as hard as you. I, who woke up at 5 a.m. every day for 40 years, who missed my grandson's birth because I was resolving an urgent delivery in Augusta, who never took a real vacation in my life. Even so, I swallowed hard and tried to adapt. Maybe I was indeed outdated. I began to gradually move away from daily management, leaving more decisions in Gregory's hands. I thought that by giving space, he would show responsibility. After all, the company would be his one day. Better that he learn while I was still there to fix the mistakes. It was during this time that I noticed changes in the behavior of the older employees toward me. Looks of pity, conversations that stopped when I approached. Jack, my first employee, who had been with me since the small shop, resigned after 30 years with the company. When I insisted on knowing the reason, he lowered his eyes and muttered, "Mr. Charles, things are changing a lot around here. I don't feel at home anymore." Only much later did I discover that Gregory had cut the benefits of the older employees and increased pressure for results. About 6 months before the wedding, Gregory came up with the idea of opening a branch in Asheville. It seemed like a good expansion plan, and I supported it. That's when he mentioned, as if it were nothing, that I should move there and take care of the new operation. "But son, I'm 67 years old. My whole life is here in Charleston." "Exactly, Dad. You know the business better than anyone, and it will be good for you to change scenery and start something new." Something in his voice didn't sound sincere. I realized it was a polite way to distance me from the headquarters, to remove me from the path. I pretended to be considering the idea, but deep down I knew something was wrong. Even so, I continued preparing everything for the wedding as if nothing was happening. I wanted to give my son the celebration his mother would have organized if she were alive. I spent a small fortune on the best venue in the city. I invited more than 300 people. I gave him a downtown apartment that cost almost $2 million as a gift. On the day of the party, I was genuinely moved. Despite everything, it was my only son getting married. And then came that night, that moment that froze my blood. I had gone to get my speech from the car, a speech I had spent weeks writing and rewriting, full of memories from Gregory's childhood, fatherly advice, messages his mother would have liked to give. That's when I heard voices coming from the room reserved for the bride and groom. "And your father? Are you really going to make him work at the new branch?" It was Amanda's voice, with that sweet tone that always seemed fake to me. No way. My father should have died years ago. "He's just getting in the way. He's a dinosaur in business, doesn't understand anything about technology. As soon as I take over, I'm going to force him into retirement," replied Gregory, my son, with a laugh I had never heard before. "But the company is his, isn't it?" Amanda questioned. "For now, but I have everything planned. The old man has high blood pressure, a weak heart. It's just a matter of time. With the inheritance, we'll take that world trip we've always dreamed of." Each word was like a stab. The paper with my speech slipped from my fingers, which suddenly felt numb. My vision blurred. For a moment I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there. Maybe that's what Gregory was hoping for. But something inside me, that strength that had helped me survive childhood hunger, my wife's death, the ups and downs of business, kept me standing. I took a deep breath, picked up the paper from the floor, adjusted my bow tie that cost a fortune, and returned to the hall. I went up on stage with the most sincere smile I could forge. I mentally tore up the speech I had prepared and spoke impromptu about new beginnings and the family's future. I toasted the couple's health, danced with the bride, hugged my son as if nothing had happened. Inside, something had broken forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch of my house looking at the stars and thinking about my Mary. "What would you do, my love?" I asked the wind. I could almost hear her answer. "You gave everything for this boy, Charles. Now it's time to think about yourself." The following Sunday, Gregory and Amanda left for their honeymoon in Greece, a 30-day trip that cost more than $100,000. Paid with my credit card, of course. As soon as their plane took off, I was already making calls. The first was to Leonard, my lawyer and friend of 30 years. We set a meeting for the first hour on Monday. The second was to Teresa, my sister, the only person who always saw through the perfect son facade that Gregory had built. "Brother, I warned you," was the first thing Teresa said when we met that night. "That boy only sees the money, not the father." "I know, sis, but a father always wants to believe the best of his son." "And what are you going to do now?" "Something I should have done a long time ago, take care of myself." The next morning at 7 o'clock sharp, I knocked on Leonard's office door. He was surprised to see me so early. Normally, I would be opening the distribution center at that hour. "Charles, what happened? You look different." "I am different, Leonard. I want to sell the company as quickly as possible, without fanfare." Leonard almost choked on his coffee, adjusted his glasses on his nose and looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "Charles, are you sure? Horizon Auto Parts is your life. Your son just got married. Shouldn't you discuss this with him first? Do we have interested competitors?" "Well, the Mendez Group made an offer 6 months ago. They offered $28 million, but you didn't even want to hear it." "Call them. Tell them I accept $30 million with 2 conditions, absolute secrecy and completion in 15 days. Leonard tried to argue, mentioned taxes, transition, the impact on employees. I listened patiently, but my decision was made. Realizing my determination, he sighed and picked up the phone. "You know your son is going to be furious, don't you?" "I know, and that's part of the plan." The following days were a flurry of secret meetings, document signings, bank transfers. The Mendez Group could hardly believe their luck. They were buying the largest distributor in the South for a price that honestly was below market value. But I didn't care. I wanted to resolve everything before Gregory returned from his honeymoon. The hardest part was facing the employees' looks when the news began to leak. Many had been with me for decades. They were almost family. Jack, who had left months earlier, came back to visit me when he heard. "Mr. Charles, is it true? Did you really sell?" "It's true, Jack. But why? Sometimes we need to lose something to not lose everything." He didn't understand at the time, but he squeezed my hand firmly. "Whatever you're doing, you have my support." On the 10th day after the sale, I transferred all the money to a bank account at another bank, one that Gregory didn't know about. On the 11th day, I contacted a travel agency specializing in senior tours. On the 12th day, I signed the last documents for the official transfer of the company. On the 13th day, I cleaned out my office. I took only 3 things: a photo of my late wife, the first screw we manufactured, and Gregory's birth certificate. When I left that building that I had built brick by brick for the last time, I felt a mix of pain and relief. It was like amputating a gangrenous limb. It hurt terribly, but was necessary to survive. Gregory and Amanda would return in 3 days. So I organized a Sunday lunch at my house. I invited Teresa and her husband Paul, who had always warned about how Gregory was only interested in my money. I also called Leonard, who was aware of everything, and asked him to bring the relevant documents. I prepared my son's favorite dish, Southern BBQ ribs that slow cook for 8 hours. The irony didn't escape me. One last time-consuming effort for someone who didn't value my work. When Gregory and Amanda arrived, they were tanned and smiling. They talked non-stop about the trip, the Greek islands, the wines, the 5-star hotels. Amanda showed photos on her phone. "Look, Mr. Charles, this was the yacht we rented to see the sunset in Santorini." A yacht with my money, and she didn't even realize the indecency of rubbing it in my face. Gregory, between sips of an expensive wine he brought from the trip, began to talk excitedly about plans for the company. "Dad, I had incredible ideas in Greece. We're going to expand the Asheville branch, modernize the entire logistics system, maybe even open an exclusive online store." Teresa looked at me, knowing what was coming next. Leonard kept his eyes fixed on his plate of food. Only my brother-in-law Paul seemed genuinely uncomfortable with what was about to happen. I waited patiently for Gregory to finish speaking. I served another piece of ribs on his plate. He had always been a glutton since he was little. Then I took an envelope from my folder. "Son, I have a surprise for you." His eyes lit up. He probably thought it was some expensive gift from the trip. Horizon Auto Parts has a new owner. Silence. A silence so deep you could hear the tick-tock of the old kitchen clock. What do you mean, Dad? New owner? Gregory laughed nervously as if I were making a bad joke. I sold the company 2 weeks ago for $30 million. My voice came out calmer than I expected. Gregory's face went pale. Amanda dropped the fork which clinked against the porcelain plate. You what? Without consulting me, without warning me. His voice rose several octaves, something that happened when he lost control. Exactly as you planned to retire me compulsorily, without consulting me. What are you talking about? He tried to appear confused, outraged. About what I heard at your wedding, son, about how the old man should have died already, about how I'm a dinosaur in business. About your plans for my inheritance after I died. Amanda choked on her water. Her face, always so controlled, showed for the first time what I already knew, guilt. Gregory looked at her furiously, then turned back to face me. He tried to deny it, then tried to explain. He said he was drunk. That wasn't what he meant to say, that I had misunderstood everything. And the money, Dad? Where is it? Of course, that would be his first concern. Not if I was hurt, not if there was still a chance for reconciliation. The money is safe, don't worry. But it's my inheritance, my future. He banged on the table, making the plates jump. No, son, it was the fruit of my work, and I decided that I deserved to enjoy it while I'm alive. I then showed him the second envelope. Inside was a plane ticket and visa documents. I've always wanted to see the world. I'm going to start with New Zealand next week, then Australia, Japan, and who knows where else the wind will take me. Dad, you can't do this. He was standing now, the veins in his neck bulging. Actually, I can. And I did. And how am I supposed to manage? How will I live? His voice oscillated between anger and desperation. You're 38 years old, with a university degree that I paid for, an apartment that I gave you as a gift, and a wife who seems to share your values. I'm sure you'll figure it out just fine. You'll regret this. This is... He searched for the right word, trembling with anger. Justice, son. That's what it's called. Teresa, my sister, tried to hide her smile. She knew better than anyone how many sleepless nights I had spent working to give my son the best. Gregory looked at Leonard, who finally raised his eyes from his plate. You helped him with this? I'll sue you. I'll sue the whole firm. Leonard, calm as always, adjusted his glasses. All procedures were legal, Gregory. Your father is the only registered owner of the company. Was, I should say. There was nothing irregular about the sale. And my rights? I worked at that company. As a hired employee with a salary well above the market, I might add, you had no ownership stake. That's when Amanda, recovered from the initial shock, put her hand on Gregory's arm. Calm down, honey. Your father is just joking. He wouldn't do this to you, to us. I looked into her eyes, those calculating eyes that never deceived me. It's not a joke, Amanda. The new owners take over on Monday. You'll probably receive official notification. Gregory completely lost control then. He shouted, threatened, even knocked over a chair. He said things a son should never say to a father. Amanda cried, but I noticed her tears were of anger, not sadness. They left, slamming the door so hard that one of the front window panes cracked. We sat in silence for a few minutes, just the sound of the clock marking time. It was Teresa who spoke first. Brother, are you okay? I realized then that I was crying. Silent tears running down my wrinkled face. They weren't tears of regret, they were tears of mourning. At that moment, I understood that I had lost my son long before that day. Maybe I had never really known him. I will be, sis. Now I will be. My phone rang dozens of times in the following days. I didn't answer any calls from Gregory or Amanda. They also showed up at my house several times, knocking on the door, demanding explanations, then begging for help. Through the window, I saw them come to take away the luxury car that Gregory could no longer afford. Leonard told me that Gregory tried to contest the sale legally, claiming that I wasn't in my right mind. Fortunately, my lawyer had taken precautions and requested a medical certificate attesting to my sanity before starting the sales process. On Friday of that week, I boarded a plane to Auckland with a small suitcase and a lighter heart. When the plane took off, I looked out the window at the lights of Charleston diminishing below. For a moment, I thought about everything I was leaving behind. Then I turned my eyes forward, to the horizon that gave the name to the company I built, and that now gave me a new chance at life. As the plane crossed the Pacific, I found myself thinking about how I had planned all this. The truth is that my distrust of Gregory didn't start on that wedding night. It was merely confirmed there. I had been observing small signs for years, storing them in the back of my mind, not wanting to admit what my father's heart refused to accept. What Gregory didn't know, what no one except Teresa and Leonard knew, was that I always had a plan B. You don't build an empire from scratch, coming from where I came from, without learning to protect yourself. My Mary used to say I was as suspicious as a scolded cat, and she was right. 3 years after Gregory took over as financial director, I noticed small discrepancies in the balance sheets. Nothing too obvious, but for someone who knew every screw in that company like the back of his hand, they were warning signs. That's when I began to keep copies of important documents in a safe I maintained at the bank, not in the office. Bank statements, contracts with suppliers, transfer records. 2 years before the wedding, I discreetly hired a forensic accountant recommended by Leonard to analyze the company's accounts without Gregory knowing. The report I received left me cold. There was a sophisticated scheme to divert resources, small amounts distributed across various operations that added up to almost $800,000 over 18 months. The money went to a shell consulting company, which I later discovered was registered in the name of Amanda's cousin. At the same time, I asked my nephew Raphael, Teresa's son, who is an IT specialist, to discreetly install a backup system for all corporate emails. It's for the company's data security, I explained, without going into details. Raphael configured everything so that not even the company's IT staff knew about the existence of this parallel system. When Gregory announced his engagement to Amanda, I intensified my silent surveillance. That's when I discovered something even more disturbing. My son had opened a bank account in the Cayman Islands and had been transferring small amounts there regularly. The plan apparently was to accumulate a financial cushion abroad before making the final move. He would probably force me into retirement and take complete control. But my real trump card, what Gregory would never imagine, was a network of contacts I had built over 40 years in the industry. Mechanics, salespeople, distributors, shop owners. Simple people who trusted me because I always kept my word and offered fair prices. Among them was George Mendez, founder of the Mendez Group, my biggest competitor. George and I started around the same time in the 80s. We competed hard for decades, but always with mutual respect. He had approached me 6 months earlier, offering to buy my company for $28 million. At the time, I immediately refused. Horizon Auto Parts was to be my son's legacy, but I kept his contact. 2 weeks before Gregory's wedding, I met George privately at a fishing spot on the Cooper River. We talked for hours, like two old warriors comparing scars. Without going into details about my family problems, I asked if the offer was still on the table. "Of course it is, Charles. In fact, I can improve it to $30 million if we can close quickly." "How long do you need to complete the transaction?" "With goodwill on both sides, 2 weeks. And if I asked for absolute secrecy until completion?" George studied me over his beer. "Any problem with your son?" "Let's say I want to surprise him." George smiled, understanding more than I said. "It'll be our secret then." We shook hands, sealing a deal that would change everything. That same day I called Leonard and brought him into the plan. He tried to dissuade me, of course, but when I showed him the evidence of the diversions and told him about the account in the Cayman Islands, he understood the gravity of the situation. "Charles, are you sure? He's your only son." "I am, Leonard. He made his choices. Now I make mine." There was still one problem: how to ensure that the employees wouldn't suffer with the transition. Many had been with me for decades. They were almost family. In another secret meeting, this time with George and his HR director, I negotiated guarantees that all jobs would be maintained for at least 2 years with the same benefits. George, who valued experience, readily agreed. When I returned from New Zealand 3 months later, the dust had settled a bit. Gregory had been hired by the Mendez Group as a manager, a requirement I made to George, not out of love for my son, but because I knew it would be the greatest humiliation for him, working as an employee in the company he once thought he would inherit. Amanda had returned to Atlanta to her parents' house. According to Teresa, who kept her informants, the marriage was hanging by a thread. Without the money and status she expected, Amanda began to show her true face. It was during this time that Gregory began to seek me out again, no longer with anger, but with a forced humility that never suited him well. First there were messages asking to talk, then long emails recalling moments from his childhood, saying how he missed me, how he had regretted everything. I responded to some when I was in a good mood. I never mentioned the money or the company. I talked about the weather in New Zealand, the landscapes of Australia, the temples of Japan. I sent photos of myself smiling in exotic places. On one of them I wrote on the back, "Still not dead, enjoy your day." Petty, perhaps, but after everything, I deserved that small pleasure. 6 months after my departure, I returned permanently to the United States. Not to Charleston, but to Asheville in the North Carolina mountains. I always liked the cooler climate. It reminded me of Ridgeville. I bought a comfortable house, neither too big nor too small, with a view of the valleys and an orchard in the back. My sister Teresa came to visit me frequently. It was during one of these visits that she brought the news. Gregory and Amanda had separated. He was living in a small rented apartment, nothing compared to what I had given as a wedding gift, which apparently was sold to pay debts. "He's unrecognizable, brother. He's lost weight, grown a beard, seems broken." I felt a twinge in my chest. Despite everything, he was my son. "He deserves it," I said. Teresa, my sister, always direct, took my wrinkled hand between hers. "The question is, did you deserve what he was planning to do to you?" A week later, I received an unexpected call. It was George Mendez. "Charles, your son came to talk to me today." "About what?" "He discovered that it was you who demanded that I hire him. He came to thank me, can you believe it? He said that working his way up from the factory floor is teaching him more than his entire business degree." I remained silent, digesting the information. "He's doing well, Charles. He arrives early, leaves late. The employees like him. I think he's trying to prove something to me or to himself, maybe to both." After that conversation, I began to consider the possibility of a reunion. Not immediately, but eventually. Time sometimes heals wounds that words only make worse. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. I began to do things I had always postponed. Guitar lessons, short trips around the country, participating in a local senior group. I met many interesting people, including a widow named Judith, a retired teacher who shared my taste for country music and baking. With the money from the sale, I was also able to fulfill an old dream. I created a foundation to help low-income widows and widowers raise their children. I called it the Mary Foundation, in honor of my wife. We offered everything from financial assistance to psychological support and professional guidance. It was a way to honor her memory and transform my pain into something positive. 8 months after my return to the United States, I received a letter. Not an email, not a WhatsApp message, but a handwritten letter, something so rare these days. It was from Gregory. "Dad, I took a long time to write this letter. I started and tore up dozens of versions. No words seemed sufficient to express my regret or to ask forgiveness for what I did and what I was planning to do. I won't lie by saying I understood everything immediately. For months I felt only anger and self-pity. I blamed you, I blamed Amanda, I blamed the world, but I never blamed myself, who was the only one truly responsible. It was working on the factory floor, talking with people who have been with the company for 20, 30 years, that I began to understand who you really are. They speak of you with a respect I never heard in the boardroom. They tell stories of how you helped in difficult times, how you knew each employee by name, how you kept your word even when it was costly. A gentleman named Claude told me how you paid for his daughter's cancer treatment when the health insurance refused. Another, Sebastian, showed me photos of the house he was able to buy because you created an interest-free loan program for employees, deducted in small installments from their salary. It was these stories, these small gestures over decades, that built your true legacy. not the money I so coveted. I'm not asking for a second chance. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understood the lesson you tried to teach me in the hardest way possible. Always your son, Gregory. I read that letter so many times that the folds in the paper began to tear. I showed it to Teresa, who for the first time in this whole story cried. What are you going to do, brother? I took a week to decide. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in over a year. Gregory, it's your father. Would you like to come for lunch here in Asheville on Sunday? The silence on the other end of the line was broken by a contained sob. I would love to, Dad. That Sunday I prepared barbecue ribs like in the old days. When the doorbell rang, my heart raced as if I were a boy. I opened the door, and there he was, thinner, with some premature grey hairs at his temples, eyes that carried a weight that wasn't there before. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then, without saying anything, I opened my arms. He took 2 hesitant steps, and then threw himself into my embrace, sobbing like when he was a child and fell off his bicycle. Dad, forgive me. Son, let's eat first. The ribs are at the perfect point. During lunch we talked as we hadn't in years. We spoke of simple things, the weather, the mountain view, the food. Then, more relaxed, we began to touch on difficult subjects. Gregory told me about his divorce, how Amanda abandoned him when she realized there would be no more luxury or status. He talked about the small apartment where he now lived, the debts he still paid, the lessons he was learning at work. You know what's most ironic, Dad? I'm really enjoying working there. For the first time, I feel like I'm building something on my own merit, not because I'm the owner's son. I told him about my travels, about the foundation, about Judith, who had become a special friend. I talked about the feeling of freedom I had never experienced before, of living without the constant weight of responsibility. We didn't mention the money from the sale or the inheritance. That no longer mattered. What we were rebuilding there was worth much more than $30 million. When he was leaving, late in the afternoon, I handed him a small package. What is this, Dad? Open it. Inside was an old rusty screw, the first one we manufactured in the small shop, which I had kept for almost 40 years. For you to remember where we came from, and that you always start with something small but fundamental. Gregory squeezed the screw in his hand until his knuckles turned white. Then he looked at me with watery eyes. Thank you, Dad, for everything, even for the hardest lesson. Sunday again here? He laughed, a genuine laugh I hadn't heard in years. I'll bring the best wine my junior manager salary can buy. As I watched his car move away down the winding mountain road, I realized that the cycle had come full circle. The justice I sought was not about punishment, but about restoration, of him, of me, of what truly mattered between us. That night, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, looking at the lights of Asheville in the distance, I felt Mary's presence stronger than ever. Did we do right, my love? I asked aloud. The mountain breeze brought a gentle wind that seemed to wrap around my shoulders like an embrace. Almost 5 years have passed since that first reconciliation lunch with Gregory. Time, that old sage who doesn't speak but teaches, has been healing the wounds between us in a way that words never could. Looking back now at 73, I see that all that pain was necessary, like a farmer who needs to prune the tree hard for it to bear better fruit in the next season. I often wonder if I was too hard on my son. Selling the company I built for him to inherit, without warning, was like ripping off a bandage all at once. It hurt terribly, but perhaps it was the only way to heal that infected wound growing between us. Money and power were poisoning his heart, transforming him into someone neither I nor his mother would recognize. The truth is that I also had my share of blame. After losing Mary, I transformed Gregory into the sole purpose of my life. I wanted so much to spare him the suffering I went through, to give him everything I didn't have, that I ended up raising a man who didn't know how to value anything because he never had to fight for anything. As my father used to say, a given gift is less cherished than a hard-earned achievement. When I sold the company, it wasn't just to teach my son a lesson, but also to free myself. For 40 years, I lived for that business. I sacrificed my health, my time, my chances to rebuild a life after becoming a widower, Horizon Auto Parts had become both my prison and my pride. By letting go of it, I could finally look at the real Horizon, not just the name on the building facade. The $30 million I received were like seeds I planted in different soils. A considerable part went to the Mary Foundation, which today helps more than 300 single-parent families throughout the Carolinas. Another part was invested in conservative applications to ensure my old age without worries. With the rest, I bought my house in Asheville, took some trips I had always dreamed of, and set aside an amount to eventually help Gregory, not to recover what he had lost, but to build something new when he was ready. As for my son, the fall was hard but necessary. After that first lunch in Asheville, we began to meet regularly. At first they were cautious conversations, like two strangers trying to get to know each other again. Gradually, the layers of hurt and distrust dissolved. We didn't go back to being what we were before. That relationship of provider-father and dependent son was dead. In its place was born something healthier, two adult men who respect and love each other despite the flaws and scars. Gregory continued working at the Mendez Group. To my surprise, he refused 2 promotions in the first years. "I want to rise on merit, not for being Charles's son," he explained to me. That attitude said more than any apology. My son was finally understanding the value of honest work, of patient building, of respect earned day by day. 2 years ago, George Mendez called me for coffee. He was thinking about retiring and had been closely observing Gregory. "Your son has potential, Charles. He's matured a lot. I'm considering offering him a minority stake in the company with a future purchase option. What do you think?" "I think he needs to hear this directly from you, not through me. This is his journey now." George smiled, understanding the lesson I had learned the hard way. 2 months later, Gregory called me, euphoric. He had accepted George's offer, but with one condition. He would use only the money he had saved these years, without asking anyone for anything. "It will take longer, Dad, but each part will truly be mine." I had never felt so proud of him as at that moment. In personal terms, my life took directions I never imagined at 68. After almost 2 years of friendship, Judith and I grew closer in a special way. She, a widow for 15 years, a retired literature teacher, brought a sweetness to my days that I thought I would never feel again after Mary. We didn't officially marry. At this stage of life, what's the need for paper, as Judith says, but we share the house in Asheville, the trips, the meals, and the comfortable silences of rainy afternoons in the mountains. Teresa, my always vigilant sister, took time to approve of Judith. "Are you sure it's not your money she wants, brother?" she asked suspiciously at first. But Judith, with her independence and her own modest patrimony as a teacher who saved all her life, soon won over even my protective sister. Today, the two are great friends and accomplices in making me follow the diet prescribed by the doctor, without much success, I must confess. The relationship between Gregory and Judith also grew naturally. She never tried to replace Mary or play the stepmother. Instead, she was a friend, an advisor when asked, a discreet but firm presence that helped heal the wounds between father and son. A year ago, Gregory introduced us to Marianne, a physical therapist he met when he injured his shoulder playing tennis, a sport he adopted to replace drinking, which for a time was his refuge in the difficult days after our rupture. Marianne is the opposite of Amanda. Simple, genuine, has worked since she was 18 and built her clinic with her own effort. Seeing my son with a woman who values him for who he is, not for what he has, gives me a peace I can't explain. On our last vacation, we did something I never imagined, a family trip. Judith, Gregory, Marianne and I went to the Florida Keys. It was during this trip, walking on the sand of Key West at sunset, that Gregory asked me a question that had been stuck for years. "Dad, have you truly forgiven me?" I looked at the horizon, where the sky and sea merged into a golden line from the sun. "Son, I realized a long time ago that there was nothing to forgive. We both did what we thought was right at that moment, with the knowledge and maturity we had. Me raising you as I did, you reacting as you did. They were choices that brought us here. And look where we are now." He smiled with teary eyes, and we continued walking in silence. Some truths are better felt than spoken. Last week, Gregory and Marianne came to dinner with news. They're expecting a child. I'm going to be a grandfather for the first time at 73. When they told me I had to sit down, a wave of emotion went through me like lightning. I thought of Mary, of how radiant she would be with the news. I thought of my parents, who didn't live to see even the son they generated prosper. I thought of the long road that brought me here, the detours, the falls, the steep climbs. "If it's a boy," said Gregory, holding Marianne's hand, "we're going to name him Charles." At that moment, the circle closed completely. Today I understand that life rarely follows the path we plan. The young farmer who left Ridgeville with a cardboard suitcase never imagined he would build the largest auto parts distributor in the South, nor that one day he would sell everything and start over at 68. The dedicated father who sacrificed everything for his son never thought that the greatest proof of love would be taking away what he thought was most important. I learned that our material possessions, no matter how large, are just tools. Like those I used for decades to repair engines, it's not the tools themselves that matter, but what you build with them. My company wasn't my true legacy. My legacy is the man my son has become, the lives I touched along the way, the love I gave and received. I also learned that it's never too late to start over. At 68, when many think life is ending, mine was just entering a new chapter. As my mother used to say, a young plant doesn't always give good fruit, but when an old tree bears fruit, it's the sweetest. Finally, I understood that justice isn't revenge. I didn't sell the company to punish my son, but to free us both. Him from the weight of an undeserved inheritance, me from the burden of a legacy that no longer made sense. True justice came when we both found our own path, when the relationship between us became based on mutual respect and genuine love, not dependence and obligation. If this story serves as a lesson to anyone, let it be this. True love isn't always giving what the other wants, but what they really need. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting the person we love face the consequences of their choices. It's painful, but necessary for them to grow. And to the children watching me, remember that your parents are imperfect human beings who sometimes err while trying to get it right. And to the parents, your children are not extensions of you, but individuals with their own journey. Love them enough to let them stumble and learn to get up on their own. Today, sitting on the porch of my house in Asheville with the mountains shrouded in mist and the smell of fresh coffee that Judith just made, I feel a peace I never thought possible after that wedding night. The pain hasn't completely disappeared. Some scars never fade, but we learn to live with them, and more importantly, to grow through them. If you've made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to the story of this stubborn old man who needed to lose almost everything to find what really mattered. I hope it has touched you in some way, that perhaps it helps in your own family struggles, your own difficult decisions. I also want to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for giving me this opportunity to open up and share a piece of my journey. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel, leave your like, comment below what city you're watching from and what time it is. And if you know someone who is going through family conflicts or difficult decisions with adult children, share this video. Maybe my words can help another family find their way back to each other before it's too late. Every day there's a new story here from ordinary people like me who faced their own challenges and found their own answers. Life is like that. Each of us has our story, but somehow they all connect through what's most human in us. A tight hug from this old man here, who learned that new beginnings can happen at any age, and that the true value of things is only discovered when we're about to lose them.